Where do we go when we sleep? What are dreams but echoes of trauma that we register beneath the black stillness of nothing? We are nothing. Sinister Narratives presents.
Leticia Veracruz would be boarding the Sunset Express in her white blouse and blue jeans, but someone new to the world would be departing. Leticia stood in the dimly lit powder room, her dark eyes flickering back and forth at her reflection. The last thing in the world that she wanted was to recognize herself. Like it was life or death, she carefully dabbed on some rouge with surgical precision, hoping to mask the deep purplish bruise that marred her left cheek. "I'm a good person," she told her reflection. "You're a good person." That's what she told herself, but even she was not convinced. She took a deep breath, her fingers trembling as she pulled a blonde wig from her bag, careful not to allow the wads of cash to spill on the floor, and positioned it neatly over her raven black hair. The wig cascaded around her shoulders, its golden hue a stark contrast to her olive skin. But it was necessary. Her tan sun hat came next, perched perfectly on top. It was a favorite of hers, and it gave her a sense of poise. Leticia hesitated for a moment, glancing at her arms. Blue and purple marks were scattered like a cruel mosaic on her skin. Gently, she rolled down the sleeves of her blouse, hiding the cruel mementos of another life she desperately wanted to erase. The fresh bruises thudded with pain with each heartbeat. Thud, thud, thud. When she was alone with her thoughts for too long, Leticia could hear her husband barking orders at her, drunken and sloven, slamming the walls with his cruel fists, thud, 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 when he wasn't beating her. Her ears still burned as he dressed her wounds in a spew of apologies and false promises, thankful to God every day that she and him never bore children. Her stomach squirmed just thinking about it. She checked her bag again, fearful that her saving grace would disappear the moment she turned away. 16,427. She counted it herself a dozen times before slipping away and making her big escape. She sold her wedding ring and many, many other useless things. She had left her snow-white Volkswagen behind, deciding that it could easily be tracked, and its disappearance would prematurely signal her departure. And she had left behind too many other things she missed dearly, and memories she wished had never been. A jolt from the train slammed her against the wall, but it steadied her nerves momentarily as she stepped out of the powder room. One heel in front of the other on the satin-red carpet, casual-like. But the train rattled, making the trip to her seat an arduous one. Her heels slid awkwardly and she clamped on the headrests of each seat for balance. Leticia cozied into a seat by the window, watching the cacti dotting the golden desert beneath the baby blue sky. Heat shimmers clouded the horizon, the setting sun, and the thought of night gave her pause. "I can't fathom another day of this dreaded heat," a woman moaned 2 rows ahead, her white-gloved hands arched about her face in the most dramatic fashion. Leticia tried her best not to roll her eyes. "Does anyone have any water to spare?" A male attendant strolled in with an assortment of beverages and a customer service smile that sparkled under a sweat-beaded brow. He offered the woman a bottle and she sucked her tooth. "Anything sparkling?" she asked. Leticia turned her attention to the other passengers, 2 men who sat at the far left. One man had freckles and sleepless eyes, the other a stunning physique and a small mustache that screamed of vanity. Leticia was glad the heat would mask her blushing. Both were quiet. Good, she thought. The train's roaring engine became pronounced for a moment, catching everyone off guard. As the door opened and in strolled an elderly man guiding a young boy of 8 or 9, with a stern pat on the back. The boy looked sad, like he had been crying, his cheeks red against his pale face. Perhaps it was just the heat. Leticia, unwilling to engage, just chalked it up to the heat. She'd be on the train for 3 days and 2 nights. 6 rivers, 3 meadows, and a mountain chain away from her husband, approximately 800 miles away, and still that was too close for her to bear. As midnight approached, the train rumbled through a deserted valley. The lights flickered and plunged the carriage into darkness. Panic whispers filled the void, the distant howl of the wind racing past the train. When the lights blinked back to life, a scene of horror emerged. The woman ahead of her shrieked and startled Letitia to her feet. The elderly man lay motionless, a dark pool forming around him. A few feet away, the young boy whimpered, clutching at his side, his clothes stained deep red. "Someone help him," cried the woman, her voice trembling. "Is there a doctor? We need a doctor." "That old man was a doctor," someone muttered. Letitia scanned the cart and saw everyone frozen in their seats as the hopelessness sunk in. Without another thought, she rushed to the boy, her instincts overriding her need for secrecy. She didn't want to engage or leave any trace that she had been on board. But when the child cried for his mummy, not a force in the world would keep her away. She gently cradled his head as she examined the bloody wound in his torso. Turning her face away as she applied pressure to the wound, holding her breath, the veins in her neck rigid. The two men in the back, visibly shaken, began frantically searching near the bodies and at the nearest seats. "What happened?" one shouted. "Where's the weapon?" "It wasn't a gun. No shots were fired." "I think they were stabbed," Letitia cried. "Stabbed?" one gasped. "We need to find the knife," the other exclaimed. "Stop," commanded the woman. "For everyone's sake, stay in separate corners. If the murderer sees us in disarray, they might strike again." "We should stay close together," shouted the man with sleepless eyes. "No," cried the woman. "Stay back. Stay away from me." "We can't just stand around," protested the man with the small mustache. The woman took offense, her eyes dancing back and forth at the two men, and Letitia cradling the dying boy in her arms. "Yes, we must stand down," she cried, her face red as fury. "None of us can move. Let the lady be with the boy. Nothing to do now." "You're crazy," one of the men shouted, his grip on a seat causing the fabric to rip from its stitching. "We need to help." "How do I know you're not the killer?" she barked bravely. The air grew heavy, thick with desert heat and murder on everyone's mind. As Letitia held the child, she began to hum softly, a lullaby she remembered from her own childhood. It was the only one she knew. The boy's painful sobs grew fainter, and his eyes slowly closed. A tear rolled down Letitia's cheek, a tear of relief. When he stopped breathing, she was finally able to breathe just a bit easier. Perhaps it was because he was no longer suffering. That's what she told herself. "The boy is dead," Letitia announced. "Time of death?" asked the man with sleepless eyes. "Minutes to midnight," muttered the man with the mustache. The carriage, heavy with grief and suspicion, rattled forward into the night. Each person eyed the other, wondering who among them could commit such a heinous act. The woman spoke up. "We must alert the authorities at the next station. It's clear that one of us is the murderer." No, Letitia thought. She can't risk giving testimony. She returned to her seat, more than eager to wipe the blood from her hands when she reached into her purse for a handkerchief and gasped. Hidden beneath her belongings was a bloody knife and her money missing. Her heart raced. She collapsed into the window beside her, her legs limp. Letitia tried to settle into the plush seat, her nerves still frayed. Her attention, however, was yanked away from her own concerns by the sudden appearance of the train conductor, Luis Ramirez. The heavy wooden door swung open violently, revealing Luis's chiseled features, which were currently distorted by a mix of shock and anguish. He'd seen the unimaginable, his dear friend, Dr. Nathaniel, lying cold and lifeless, along with the corpse of the little boy. "No," Luis whispered, stumbling over his words, his voice thick with emotion. "Nathaniel." In his shock, he reached for something heavy at his belt, a pistol. The metal gleamed ominously under the dim lights of the carriage. "Everyone, face the wall!" Luis's voice boomed. It was evident that Luis was not the authoritative type, but he spat out orders, perhaps from memory of a protocol from long ago. "Hands in the air, legs spread apart." Letitia did as instructed, tears welling in her eyes. She could barely see. The piercing glare of the conductor felt like it could see right through her wig, and she'd be found out. The first to be searched was the tall man with a stunning physique, his posture a mix of a dancer's grace and a fighter's grit. "Lionel Richmond," he said with a hint of pride. "I train champions, boxing and ballet." As Luis patted him down, his hands expertly moving over Lionel's form, he found only benign items: a neat stack of paper bills, fountain pen, and a brass compass. The petite woman with an air of self-proclaimed elegance was next. She held her head high even as tears threatened to spill. When Luis's hands brushed her sides, she let out a sob. "I'm sorry," Luis whispered, maintaining his professionalism. "It's necessary, Mr. Galliano," she responded, clearing her throat. "Jacqueline Galliano." He pulled out a few items from her pockets: insulin, a pocket knife, lipstick, and a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" Luis asked, waving the paper. Jacqueline hesitated. It's nothing," she murmured. She lowered her head. Why are you all looking at me?" Letitia cried. Lionel's voice, gruff and authoritative, sliced through the tension that cloaked the room. "You!" he pointed at Letitia. "Lie on the ground now, hands on the back of your head." Terrified, Letitia immediately complied. "No, come over here," he ordered. Then he turned to Jacqueline. "Pat her down." Letitia did as she was told, her face inches away from the carpeted floor of the cabin. Hot tears streaked her face as she looked into the innocent eyes of the dead boy. Jacqueline watched, eyes wide with indignation. "Why should I be the one to search her?" she demanded, her voice shrill. Her heels stepping backward, her gaze darted between the Percy, the dead child, and Lionel's assertiveness. "Because," Lionel began with an air of superiority, "a lady should ideally pat down another lady. It's only proper." Jacqueline shot back, her words dripping with sarcasm. "And since when did you become the arbiter of propriety?" "Because," Lionel asserted, pointing at himself, "I've already been cleared by Luis. He found nothing on me." The sleepy-eyed man rushed in. "That doesn't prove anything," he snapped, frustration evident in his voice. "Just because you were checked first doesn't absolve you of suspicion." "He found nothing on me either," shouted Jacqueline. There was a pregnant pause as everyone stirred in their skin. That note, that Latin transcript, did not inspire any confidence that you are innocent of anything, Lionel added boldly. He spat at the floor. "Devil worshipper." Amidst the back and forth, Letitia lay on the ground, a broken figure. "Please," she sobbed, her voice barely audible, "don't hurt me." The sleepy-eyed man appeared to take pity on Letitia, still on the floor beside 3 bloody corpses. "Jacqueline, search the purse. I'll handle the pat-down." As he kneeled next to Letitia, he finally introduced himself. "I am Miguel Santos." "And I'm innocent," Letitia responded, chuckling under the salt of her tears. Letitia's body quivered as Miguel's hands cautiously explored her clothes. Her tears flowed freely when he touched her bruised arms and legs. "Who did this to you?" he asked himself. At that very moment, a sharp shriek pierced the air. Jacqueline, having rummaged through Letitia's purse, held the blood-stained knife aloft. "This was in her purse!" she exclaimed, her voice quivering with shock. The discovery galvanized Letitia into action. In one swift move, she rolled away and rose, her sun hat and blonde wig tumbling down, her raven-black hair spilling down her shoulders. But then, the lights began their eerie dance once again, plunging the cabin into an intermittent pattern of light and darkness. The brief moments of illumination captured scenes like snapshots, Letitia and her true identity revealed, Miguel's defensive posture, Jacqueline terrified as the bloody knife trembled in the air. But nothing prepared them for the last image, Lionel's throat ripping out from where he stood. Not a single one of them had moved an inch. The room went silent except for Lionel's agonized gasps and the wind racing past the train. Cartilage and splintered bone splattered on the window, and Lionel collapsed against the wall. They were all innocent, and all in mortal danger. Desperate to keep Miguel on her side, Letitia's shrill voice echoed against the walls. I'm innocent. It must have been Jacqueline. Jacqueline, equally distressed, retorted sharply. How dare you? I would never harm anyone, let alone a child. Miguel, his back pressed firmly against the corner, his eyes darting between the two women, tried to assert some form of control. Enough, both of you. Stay where you are. His tone held a hint of command, even though his face betrayed the terror he felt. Why the disguise, Miss? He pressed, his voice softening slightly. Taking a shuddering breath, Letitia hesitated for a moment before confessing. I'm running away from my husband. She wiped away the tears that streamed down her face with the back of her hand. He's abusive. He hurt me so bad. I lost our baby, California. It was my hope for a fresh start. He can't know I'm here. No one can know. Jacqueline's sarcastic laugh cut through the bleak silence. A likely story. You're just another cheap skirt trying to play the victim card. She turned to Miguel. We don't even know her name. Letitia didn't verbally respond. Instead, she slowly rolled up her sleeves, revealing a tapestry of purple, blue, and black bruises that painted a harrowing story of pain and abuse. The sight of it was a powerful rebuke, rendering Jacqueline speechless. My name is Letitia Veracruz, and I boarded the Sunset Express to escape my past. I don't know how the knife ended up in my purse, but when I saw it there, I also learned that all of my money was stolen. How much money? Jacqueline inquired, eager to rip her story apart. 16,000. It was everything I had to my name. The name you've tried to escape, Jacqueline quipped. Miguel visibly winced, his empathy clear in his eyes. I've seen those bruises up close, Jacqueline. Now, if you would do me the courtesy, it's your turn to explain. What is that Latin message you had? Jacqueline hesitated, her haughty demeanor crumbling. It's a protective chant, she admitted. My grandmother used to recite it when I was a child. She said it would keep the devil away from good-hearted souls. How does that work? Letitia asked in disbelief. It's a reminder that even good people can do great harm, Jacqueline replied. Does it make that good person suddenly bad? Perhaps. She shrugged. All we can do is keep our distance and pray for the best. Miguel, confused and desperate to make sense of the situation, pressed on. Why carry such a message? Do you believe in its power? Jacqueline looked away, visibly shaken. After everything that's happened, I don't know what to believe anymore, but yes, I've always felt a certain comfort carrying it with me. Thud, 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 thud. A peculiar sound broke their contemplation, a muted, rhythmic thumping, not unlike the impatient knocking of someone at a door or the distant slamming of cruel, drunken fists against a wall. All eyes in the cabin were drawn to its source, the suitcase belonging to the deceased doctor. With caution, Miguel approached it. Jacqueline and Leticia exchanged anxious glances. Miguel, swallowing hard, undid the latches and lifted the suitcase's lid. To their collective horror, nestled among the doctor's personal effects was a severed human hand impeccably embalmed, and it was knocking from the inside of the suitcase, its fingers flexing and clenching, as if trying to escape its leather prison or communicate some desperate message. Letitia let out a sharp gasp, staggering back, her eyes locked on the grotesque spectacle. Madre de Dios, she whispered, making the sign of the cross. Jacqueline, though visibly rattled, approached the suitcase. Whose hand is this? She demanded, her voice shaky. No idea, Miguel admitted, his eyes never leaving the hand. But we have to consider that the doctor might not be the victim he appeared to be. Letitia cleared her throat, doing her best to speak. What the hell is that? What the hell is it for? Jacqueline, shivering at the thought, whispered, protection, power, a dark ritual. As they pondered the implications, the hand suddenly ceased its movement, its fingers pointing directly at Letitia. The weight of the gesture wasn't lost on any of them. The hand, eerily still after its abrupt movement, lay there, its fingers outstretched towards Letitia. Miguel, trying to make sense of the situation, suggested, Letitia, you should touch the hand. Maybe it's trying to tell you something. She looked at him as if he were mad. Touch that? Are you out of your mind? Jacqueline, however, found herself agreeing with Miguel. Perhaps it holds answers. We need to understand what's happening. You touch it, Jacqueline, Letitia cried. You're obviously well versed in the ways of demonic forces. Letitia, I don't know anything about these dark, malevolent forces. I just know that it is rooted to decline a handshaker. Do you seek to upset these unknown forces? Letitia shot Jacqueline a look that screamed, Are you serious? Jacqueline shrugged sadly. With a trembling hand, Letitia reached out and took a deep breath, clasping the cold fingers of the embalmed hand. She threw her head back. The train's lights flickered on and off in a dizzying dance, and the black of her eyes overtook the white. A flood of images, sounds, and sensations overtook her. She was in a dimly lit room. The sting of antiseptic and blood caked the air. There were tables lined up, and on each table lay a restrained figure, their muffled screams echoing in the room. They were of varying ages, children with fear in their eyes, women crying, and men gritting their teeth, trying to fight off the pain. From Letitia's perspective, she could see her own hands, Dr. Nathaniel's hands, as they expertly picked up scalpels, forceps, and other instruments that glinted in the fluorescence. She was the one experimenting on these helpless subjects. There was an intensity, a single-minded focus in what Nathaniel was doing. But it was not out of malice, it was out of obsessive curiosity. She felt his internal conflict. On one hand, he was repulsed by his actions, the screams and pleas from his subjects haunting his dreams. Yet, he believed that there was something greater he was uncovering, a deeper understanding of human existence and consciousness. Devoid of emotion, the doctor continued his procedure. It was then that Letitia felt a sharp pain in her hand, and she was pulled back to reality, releasing the embalmed hand. Letitia fell to her knees, panting, her face pale. He was experimenting on them, she whispered, searching for some profound truth, some deeper understanding of life and death. That hand, she pointed shakily, belonged to someone who knew ancient rituals. Dr. Nathaniel betrayed him. Miguel hesitated for a moment, clearly weighing his words. The flickering lights of the train made the atmosphere even more eerie, and the embalmed hand seemed to cast an elongated shadow on the suitcase. He began, rubbing the back of his neck. I wasn't just a passenger. I was searching for answers of my own. Letitia and Jacqueline shared a look. Answers about what? Jacqueline pressed. Miguel sighed, the weight of his story pressing down on him. My younger sister, Mariana, went missing 2 years ago. The last time anyone saw her was on a train like this one. The memory seemed to cause him pain. Letitia approached cautiously. Miguel, did Dr. Nathaniel have anything to do with her disappearance? Miguel's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I have no way of knowing for certain, but I believe so. A few weeks ago, I stumbled across some of Nathaniel's notes. There was a reference to a test subject named Mariana. My heart sank. I had to know the truth, which is why I was on this train. Nathaniel was my lead. Jacqueline interrupted. But that doesn't explain why the doctor had an embalmed hand in his suitcase. Miguel rubbed his temples. The notes, they mentioned some rituals. It sounded insane. But after seeing that hand, I'm starting to believe it. Nathaniel was experimenting with bringing the dead back to life. That hand, he looked at it with a mix of disgust and fascination. It might be a part of that ritual. A chilling silence hung in the air as they processed what Miguel had shared. Letitia, gathering some courage, whispered, We should search the rest of Nathaniel's belongings. There might be other clues. As they rifled through the doctor's suitcase, Jacqueline found a leather-bound journal. It seemed old, pages yellowed with age. The journal was filled with scrawlings, drawings of symbols, and detailed surgical procedures. Jacqueline read aloud, her voice trembling. The hand serves as the bridge between the living and the dead. Once awakened, it seeks out the vessel to do its bidding. Letitia's eyes widened. That's what happened when I touched it. Jacqueline nodded, flipping to another page. It continues. The vessel will be granted the visions of the deceased. This gift is also its cursor. Leticia gasped. Does that mean I'll keep having these visions? Miguel took a deep breath. We need to find a way to help you. But first, we must find out who the owner of that hand was and what Nathaniel wanted with him. The train's vibrations, the palpable tension in the air, and the uncertainty of the situation left everyone on edge. Just as the remaining passengers were about to address the immediate concerns, the door slid open with a piercing screech, revealing an elderly woman with striking grey eyes, her face a roadmap of wrinkles that hinted at a life full of experiences. I sensed it, she announced breathlessly. A spirit is here among us, a vile, vengeful one at that. The atmosphere grew colder. Jacqueline and Miguel exchanged a wary glance while Leticia, her wig now disheveled, eyed the woman with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. How do you know? Leticia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The elderly woman approached the deceased boy, her eyes softening with sorrow. This child is lost, and the one who did this, his spirit is angry and tormented. I am Cassandra, she introduced herself. Psychic medium extraordinaire. I've been tailing the doctor. He owes me money. We need to search the boy's belongings, Leticia said, feeling an inexplicable connection to the young victim. Maybe there's a clue about his identity. Carefully, she began to inspect the boy's pockets. Inside, she found a small leather-bound notebook, a locket with a photo of a woman who seemed to be his mother, and a crumpled train ticket. The ticket bore a name, Mateo Garcia. Mateo, Leticia whispered, holding the locket tightly. Cassandra reached out and gently took the locket, examining the photograph. This woman, she said with a tremor in her voice, I sense her presence strongly. She's searching for her son. She's worried, panicked. Miguel looked skeptical. Can you communicate with her? Maybe she can give us answers. Cassandra hesitated, then nodded slowly. I can try. As Cassandra moved closer to where Dr. Nathaniel's possessions lay scattered, a chilling aura emanated from the suitcase, but it wasn't the medical instruments or the neatly folded clothes that caught her attention. It was the embalmed human hand, its fingers frozen in a twisted gesture, as if trying to reach out for something. She gasped, her eyes widening in horror. No one should touch that, she exclaimed, pointing at the hand but ensuring she was a safe distance away. It's cursed, and given my sensitivity to the otherworldly, I dare not come into direct contact with it. Miguel approached the suitcase cautiously, peering at the grotesque object. Why did Dr. Nathaniel have this, and what is its connection to the murders? Only one way to find out, Cassandra said, her voice trembling. Quickly, she took a small, ornate box from her bag, setting it on a vacant seat. Opening it, she revealed a white candle. As she struck a match and lit the candle, the flame flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows upon the walls of the compartment. Join hands, she instructed, her voice taking on a tone of urgency. We must form a circle. I will attempt to communicate with young Mateo to seek answers. Jacqueline hesitated, but seeing Leticia and Miguel comply, she took their hands. As the four of them completed the circle, Cassandra began to chant, her voice echoing in a haunting melody. The atmosphere grew thick, the weight of unseen presences pressing down upon them. Suddenly, a plume of astral fluid burst forth from Cassandra's mouth, swirling and coalescing in the dim light. It was an ethereal, shimmering substance that seemed to dance with a life of its own. Jacqueline and Leticia, their hands gripped tightly, began praying under their breath, seeking protection and guidance. Miguel, despite his initial skepticism, watched with wide-eyed terror. Cassandra's chanting grew louder, more desperate. As the astral material floated and merged, forming an almost solid silhouette, a hushed whisper echoed through the compartment. Mother! Leticia recognized the voice immediately from the boy's dying words. The spectral form of Mateo began to appear, his face tormented, eyes filled with tears. The embalmed hand twitched in response, as if aware of the boy's presence. Why, Mateo? Cassandra gasped, her voice strained. Who did this? Matteo did not respond. He held his gaze toward Letitia. Cassandra turned to Letitia. "Do you know this boy?" "No. We only met on the train. I held him as he died." Letitia cleared her throat, mustering the courage. "Matteo, how did you and the doctor die?" Still, he said nothing. "How did you die, Matteo?" "I killed the doctor. With my mind," he muttered. "I just wished he would die and the lights went out." "Why did you want him dead, Matteo?" Letitia asked, her hands folded over her mouth. "You know why. You've seen the other side." "The experiments?" "Yes," he said. "The deaths will continue until you find the other hand and have it shake with the one in the doctor's belongings." Jacqueline cleared her throat, eyeing her surroundings. "But there was only one hand." She turned to Matteo's spirit. "Where is the second hand?" "I don't know, lady. It was cut off too." "How can we help you, Matteo?" Miguel pleaded. "How can we help your soul rest in peace?" "It's too late for that now. That's not how any of this works." He said with complete indifference, "You should save yourselves if you can." "You will die trying," he muttered before the connection was lost. Cassandra collapsed to the floor and the astral fluid that composed Matteo splattered all over. "She's not breathing," Jacqueline cried. "Cassandra, get up, get up. We need you." Miguel patted Leticia's shoulder. "Are you okay, Leticia?" he asked. "What is it?" In the face of Jacqueline's guttural cries, pounding Cassandra's chest with her delicate fists. Thud, thud, thud. Leticia turned to Miguel, as if nothing were wrong and everything was right. "None of us are going to survive this," she replied, her face dry of tears. "What the hell? We've got nothing to lose." Letitia strolled to the other side with a vigor and confidence that truly betrayed everything about her. "I sure as hell don't." She stopped at the deceased doctor's belongings, eyeing the severed hand. She looked at it closely. The nails blackened with death, pale frost-white features, the veins, tunnels of darkness frozen in time. She saw the tattoo of an eye at the web of flesh between the thumb and forefinger. "Interesting," she said, bored as hell. Letitia offered her hand to shake. "I'm Letitia Veracruz, and I am a good person. Who the fuck are you?" There was a pregnant pause before the severed hand leapt into the air and shook Letitia's hand. Every bulb in the train erupted, casting the train and the final 3 passengers into darkness. To be continued. Like and subscribe for more thrilling and spooky tales to fall asleep to. Stay beautiful.